Hello and welcome to game 10 of 14 in this 2024 World Chess Championship. So we're coming down to the last and final games in this World Chess Championship. Who will pull ahead first? So after 9 games, everything was tied up. So let's take a look at today's game. All right, the world chess champion, 32-year-old Ding Liren of China, starts out with d4, grabbing space in the center, controlling the e5 square with this pawn. And now the game continues with knight to f6 by 18-year-old challenger Gukesh Damaraju of India. A flexible move here, covering these central squares with the knight. And the game continues with knight to f3, also flexible, kind of waiting to see what the opponent does. So we have an equal game so far. After d5, the center is equal, the knights are equal, and the game continues with bishop to f4. So we have the London system. We had a London system earlier in this match, so let's see how this one turns out. Okay, e6 being played, which does allow the dark squared bishop to develop, maybe to d6, attacking and blocking the white bad bishop here, although that would allow an exchange, giving up black's good bishop for white's bad bishop, but let's see what happens. e3, a common move in the Sicilian. Now, if the knight were to attack the bishop, there's a possibility of just letting the bishop be captured, and then after the pawn would capture, white would kind of lock down this e5 square here. All right, so the game continues with c5, a common counterattack in the French defense, and also here. And in a lot of d4 games, a lot of times you'll push this c pawn, attacking the more valuable pawn with the less valuable flank pawn, and also the knight is able to jump in behind here. So the game continues with bishop developing and white is ready to castle. And now we have a confrontation between the two bishops here. So what will the what will the world champion do? He decides to capture the c pawn here, and apparently this is the best move because now if the young challenger wants to keep material even, he's already moved this bishop once and he'll have to move it again to recapture. So he does recapture the pawn, keeping material equal, and now we have another attack here on the central pawn. So that is ignored in favor of castling. White castles as well, so both kings are safe and the rooks have moved closer towards the center where they'll be more active. And now the knight develops here, helping to control important squares in the center. And so the game continues with knight development by white, and black captures a pawn in the center here, also offering a possible queen exchange. And so the pawn is captured first, and then we have knight attacking bishop, attempting to get rid of the bishop pair. So the game continues with bishop developing forward here with an attack on the queen. So a block by the bishop, and this knight repositions up towards the center, helping to guard the bishop here along with this knight, as there are two attackers piling up on that bishop. So the game continues with knight blocking here, and some material is exchanged. Queens are off the board, but this does help the rook to centralize, trying to gain control of this open d file. So what will white do about that? Well, first he exchanges off a pair of bishops, wrecking the kingside pawn structure here, leaving a weak pawn on h7, doubled pawns on the f-file. But this does help restrict the knight from being able to move forward. So the game continues with the rook centralizing, fighting for the open file. And now we have bishop blocking. The other rook that wasn't doing anything, centralizes and lines up on the knight. So let's see what happens next. The bishop drops back here. Now black is able to better fight for this open file. And so we have an exchange, and black is left with control of the open d file. So the king moves towards the center, a great strategy in the end game. As the pieces come off the board, the kings can be valuable for attack, defense, just helping out in the position. As long as the queens are not on the board. If there are still queens on the board, or even a bishop pair that could harass the king, you have to watch out when you're developing the king, bringing the king out into the open. Just make sure it cannot get in trouble. So black brings his king forward as well, the best move in the position. And at this point, white just has a slight edge here. So a3 is played, preventing the knight from moving forward here, along with this e-pawn that stops the knight from moving forward. So the game continues with f5, gaining some space, perhaps preventing this pawn from pushing forward. But now, this knight could jump forward, but will that really do much? And now the king can help control the center a little bit better by pushing forward to f6 if he wants. All right, king towards the center. Black moves his king towards the center, and the bishop drops back here. Perhaps wanting to control this square, although the king is doing that. Maybe the bishop would like to reposition onto the long diagonal after this knight moves out of the way. Let's see what white has in mind here. So black drops back with his knight, the best move in the position. Now the bishop is free and a little bit more active here on this diagonal. What is the plan by these top class players? It looks like g3 pushing forward, maybe with an idea of pushing this pawn forward, gaining space on the king side. And also, we notice that all of white's pawns are on the dark squares, and his bishop covers the opposite colored squares. And his opponent's bishop now can no longer attack any of these pawns as they're all on the dark squares. So we have a battle of the rooks on the c file and an exchange. Knight recaptures, but now the knight is left on the back rank. It will have to reposition forward and try and become more active. So white takes this opportunity to drop his knight back with an idea of pressing forward. So knights are maneuvering here. We could have an exchange of knights now. Let's see. Yes, knights are exchanged. Bishop captures and is lined up on these pawns. So now we see that white has the light squared bishop, and many of black's pawns are on these light squares. So that can help to restrict the movement of the bishop, but these pawns could also become targets. So let's see how the game continues. Bishop develops off the back rank, helps protect this pawn, kind of fires down through the center and towards the king side. So the pawn pushes forward, preventing the king from coming forward and getting more active. So now we have the young challenger placing his pawns on the dark squares. So now these pawns are safe from any attack by the bishop. and the king tries to centralize. So black repositions his king where he will be able to perhaps come down here and get ready to help in the fight for the center. So king is racing towards the queen side. Gukesh tries to stop Ding's king from moving forward. A pawn pushes forward, gaining space, preventing the king from coming forward along with this bishop. So let's see what happens here. Pawn pushes forward, so that's another pawn onto the dark squares where it will be less likely to come under fire. Well, cannot come under fire by the light squared bishop anymore. So the king steps forward, and now we have a pawn also getting on the dark squares where it cannot be attacked by the light squared bishop. Bishop drops back, and now this bishop does likewise. So it looks like, we could be heading into a drawish positions as these bishops maneuver back and forth. And it looks like the position has been repeated twice already. So will we have a draw by repetition of position? Let's find out. So the bishops just maneuver, and yes, we have a 36 move draw here in game 10. So, who will pull ahead first? Or will we go 14 games and all tied after 14? Then that will result in a playoff where rapid games, and then if those are tied, we could even go into blitz games for this playoff to decide who the world champion will be for 2024. All right, well, feel free to leave any comments. Like and subscribe to support the channel if you haven't already. Thank you for watching, and have a super chess day.